I'm representing John Lehsou, who's over there with the apples. Hi there. And he made a fortune in the gold mining business, but he didn't come out here to mine gold. He was hired by John Owen of Fort Owen down here to bring some mining equipment west from Iowa. And so that was way back in the 1860s. And so he led a wagon train pulled by oxen all the way across the overland trail. When they got to Montana, they were attacked by the Sioux warriors who killed 5 of the men, and they lost all their horses, but he still managed to come out here with the oxen and the wagons. And then, so he made it to Fort Owen down there, and then he worked for John Owen for a year. And then he got the bright idea that, hey, the overland trail is kind of like I-90, you know. And you know where that rest area is? They have that new fancy rest area on your way to Drummond on the south side of the road there. That was where his stage station was. And you see, it's still an important stop along the highway. Right? And so he built the stage station, and he ran that, and he figured all the travelers on the Mullen Road. That's where the Mullen Road would cross the river, you know, the Clark Fork River. And so people had to, you know, get on the ferry and move all their stuff, and so that was a really good place to build a trading post. And so that trading post, if you would like to see an authentic, real-life trading post from the 1860s, it still exists, but it's been moved to Rock Creek, and it's Ekstrom's stage station. Restaurant, maybe you stop there. Those are the very logs that this fellow carved out of the hillside back in the 1860s. So while he was running the stage station right here, here's the interstate. This is Garnett, Ghost Town, and Highway 200 would be right about here. So he's running this stage station down here. Meanwhile, Kroger had a successful brewery up here in Beartown. See? There was 5,000 people living in this area around Beartown in the 1860s. And Kroger had been following gold rushes, and he came up Elk Creek over here, and he struck it rich finally. And he invested then in a brewery over here in Beartown.
Which doesn't exist anymore.
Right. In Beartown there's a sign there, but there's nothing really there. Even though there was 5,000 people, they say, living there. What happened to them? They followed the gold rush to the next place, which was Cedar Creek, which is west of here. What happened to their things? They just took them with them. They were really living in tents, you know. And so once they're gone, there's nothing left except not even a forest, because they cut the forest down to build their shack, you know, and also for the timbers in their mines. So anyway, he has to go down to Deer Lodge to get grain for his brewery, and of course he has to stop at the inn, and probably I bet he sold beer to patrons at the inn. You know what I'm imagining? Anyway, so Kroger talked Lehsou into moving up to Beartown, working with him, and then they started making claims on the gold.
After the miners had left, right? After the rush.
Right. So the big rush was sort of it had moved on. I think in 1869 or so that it had already moved on to Cedar Creek, which is west of here. But these resourceful people stayed behind and actually got gold that the other people had been in too much of a hurry to mine.
Also, there wasn't quite enough water to effectively placer mine at that time, so they could only do so much, and then they ran out of the water, which was the main resource for placer mining. So the advantage that Lehsou had is that he was an engineer, right, by training.
Yeah.
So he was able to engineer a series of reservoirs and locks and ditches that were all graded very carefully to create a hydraulic head that he could use to plaster mine. And so they were able to get more out of the plaster than those that had come before.
Yeah. So then they
exploited Chinese labor to do it.
Yeah, you can find evidence of all this when you read the documents. But anyway, so they would go then down to Deer Lodge to get their supplies, and that was a farming community, so they could get grain, so they could make their beer, right? And so they go there, and of course, you know who the leading citizen of Deer Lodge was? Conrad Coors, who was the cattle king of Montana, and he was very wealthy. He was selling cattle to the miners down in southwest Montana, and so he's very wealthy, and so he hires 2 more people from Holstein. They're all from Holstein, Germany. They come all the way from Holstein, and it's 2 women, and one of them is buried right over there. That's Dora. So Dora married John Lehsou, and they had 3 children who are buried right there. And her sister Anna married Kroger, and they had 4 children, and so they raised them all in Beartown. But at that time, then there was probably only like 100 people left in Beartown. So they spent 20 years making a living in Beartown. In fact, Lehsou was a postmaster in Beartown. Then the railroad came in, and that meant you could ship heavy equipment in to Montana. So if you wanted to have an underground mine, you know, where you're mining out quartz veins and such to get the gold out of it, you have to have, you have to have hoists, you have to have steam things, you have to have all kinds of heavy equipment, and a mill. They had to have a ball mill for crushing the rock to get the gold out of it. So that actually costs a huge amount of capital to get all of that. Plus, you had to get all the equipment up there. Up till then, it was just a horse trail up through this canyon. If you've been through there, you know how narrow that canyon is, going up from the highway to Garnett. But they actually built a wagon road so they could move this heavy equipment up, and then they could have underground mines. See? So these guys sold their patented claim to Muzzingbrod and his partner so they could do the underground mining, and they made enough money on the sale to move to, so John moved to Missoula, and we're standing on his property right here. His land went from here all the way to the interstate and all the way over to Grant Creek that way, and all the way over to those gravel pits that way. And his partner Kroger moved his family down to Phillipsburg and started a brewery that was very, very successful. And then their children were into aviation, right? Isn't that right? Kroger's 2 boys got into aviation.
I don't know.
That's what I heard.
Okay, could be. They were in California.
So I was researching this, and you read all newspaper articles and you read this and that and stuff. So the reason this was part of Lehsou's property is he sold this for $1 to Missoula County so they could expand their cemetery.
And then Lehsou had other partners because he was a successful businessman, right?
Right.
So he made partnerships with these guys here, which are, this is me, Frenchman.
Here I am, Elvers. I was a lonely bachelor all my life.
And an odd fellow.
Yeah, I know. Odd fellow.
Literally and figuratively. But we didn't have as much success with the mines as Lehsou and his partner Kroger. So Lehsou sponsored our house in Missoula.
Which was actually the Rattlesnake, right?
Yep.
They had a little place. These 2 partners Elfers and Apel.
Okay.
Yeah, lived together until they died in that little house up the rattlesnakes.
Yep.
And so the reason the stones are identical, can you tell them that?
So that when I made the little quip about Oddfellows, the International Order of Oddfellows is something kind of like a Masonic order. I don't think they're actually Masonic, are they?
No.
But
It's a four-man's Masonic.
yeah, they're sort of.
Well, you could say that. My grandfather was an odd fellow.
Really? No, I read that.
Well,
You didn't have to be
poor
rich.
well,
Yeah.
okay. We can talk about that.
Well, the stones represent their membership in the Oddfellows fraternal organization, and we're actually paid for by the Oddfellows also, because they were poor Oddfellows, but they were not that all Oddfellows are poor necessarily. For instance, Lehsou was not.
Yeah, he was also an Oddfellow.
And also Kroger was an Oddfellow. Right.
And so was Coors.
So there were some
Oddfellows had a very
rich
strong
Oddfellows.
fellowship here.
Yeah, there's an Oddfellows organization in Missoula to this day. Where's their temple? Oddfellows.
I don't know. Do you know?
No.
Google it.
My grandfather was in Chicago, but I don't think that's the name.
Yeah. They had a big thing over in Helena. I know it's a wonderful organization to help a lot of people.
Service.
Don't they help orphans and such? Isn't that one of the things they try to do?
Probably. They play cards a lot.
You talk about the brewery and such in the 1860s.
Yeah.
Was there any effect out this far west of the Civil War?
Actually, a lot of the miners were displaced Southerners.
As in avoiding the war?
No, had lost their families or their.
Yeah.
After the war. After
right.
the war.
But actually, I think a lot of gold was first struck down in southwest Montana in 1862 during the war, and there was like 10,000 people descended on Bannock and Virginia City, and as I understand it, Abraham Lincoln needed that gold to supply the Union with equipment from Europe. And so actually Montana was a very strategic part of the Yankees campaign to win the war. And so in fact he had allowed that Mullen Trail to be developed as a wagon road, so that that cut 400 miles off of the route to the goldfields of Montana. But that eventually led to Custer's Last Stand, because they broke several treaties, and that area was the best hunting grounds of several of the tribes that later came together.
But they broke the treaties because in the desperation of the war effort, they just overlooked the treaties.
Well, it was after the war. It was like they broke the treaties twice. First time they broke it, there was the Fort Fetterman massacre, and then they actually shut the trail down. That was after the war. Grant shut down the trail because it was too expensive to protect travelers on the trail and keep all those garrisons going. But then in the 1870s, then the trail reopened, and that's when they were breaking treaties, and that led to Custer's Last Stand in 1876. Yeah.
But then there were the soldiers from the Civil War were the miners, and that part of why the gold rushes were such a boom and bust cycle is that they weren't educated on being miners. They came and they were seeking their fortunes and all, but they were just following the rush. Whereas engineers like Lehsou had a lot of training in what it actually takes to extract minerals from the earth, and so they were able to come in the wake of these booms and clean up what had been that had been left behind by inexperienced.
And also, of course, they raised families, so they were much more settled than rushing off with your tent to the next
Claim.
gold claim. Yep.
And often they wouldn't even come out of their claim like any richer than they were when they got there. They just
They'd
Yeah.
spend
would
it all.
just spend it all and then go on to the next.
And it's the same with precarious labor in our current age. You have a boom of some sort and people rush in and make money, but they're exploited by the sort of capitalists that happen to be running those operations, and then so the labor force ends up no better off than they started. In fact, probably worse off in general.
So Lehsou wound up as the vice president of the main bank in Missoula after he sold that mine for enough money to buy all this property we're standing on, but also to invest in that mine, in that bank. So he was the principal shareholder of Western Montana National Bank there, and that's that big building. It's on the corner of
The granite
Higgins and Higgins and Front, not Front,
Main.
Sterling.
Main.
Sterling.
Higgins and Broadway. It's the tall building there where Teddy Roosevelt came to give a speech. So he wound up being a vice president of that bank and the principal shareholder. Whereas, and then Kroger invested his money in a big brewery down in Phillipsburg.
Is that the same brewery in Seaburg that's operation now?
Well, that's something I don't know for sure, but I think it shut down in the
Prohibition.
Prohibition, and I don't really know exactly what happened after that. So, anything else?
good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
you're welcome. Yeah, right.